The first thing that hit them wasn't the sight. It was the smell. Imagine it. 20,000 rotting corpses. The stench didn't just sting the nose. It crawled into every sense, forcing even hardened Ottoman soldiers to double over and vomit where they stood. Sultan Mehmed II, the man who had conquered mighty Constantinople itself, rode forward, expecting to see a city preparing for siege. Instead, he rode straight into a nightmare. What he found wasn't a forest of trees. It was a forest of human beings. Thousands of men, women, and children impaled on wooden stakes, their bodies in every stage of decay. Some were still twitching days into their slow, agonizing deaths. And in the very center, on the tallest stake of all, dressed in ceremonial robes, was Mehmed's own general, Hamza Pasha. This sight would haunt the Sultan for the rest of his life. At the heart of this horror stood the man history would come to know as Dracula. A ruler so cruel, so creatively sadistic that even conquerors who crushed empires turned pale and fled from what he did. But here's the most disturbing part. None of this was myth. None of this was a vampire tale. This was a real man who had learned through careful practice that a human body could survive on a stake for up to 3 days if you placed it just right. And the story of how he learned this skill begins with his childhood in chains. Winter 1431, Sigishwara, Transylvania. In a stone house marked with a carved dragon, the cries of a woman giving birth filled the night. The baby that entered the world would one day make entire armies scream in terror. They named him Vlad after his father. But history would rename him after his favorite pastime, impaling human beings. His father Vlad II Dracula was part of the Order of the Dragon, a knightly brotherhood sworn to defend Christian Europe against the advancing Ottoman Empire. Dracula means dragon in Romanian, and so his son became known as Dracula, the son of the dragon. But it wouldn't be the dragon's name that terrified generations. It would be his chosen method of execution. The world Vlad was born into was collapsing. The Ottomans were spreading west like a plague. Christian kingdoms fell one after another. Even Constantinople, the shining jewel of Byzantium that had stood for more than 1,000 years, was about to fall. And caught between the Muslim Ottomans and Christian Europe lay Wallachia, a small blood-soaked buffer state. This was Vlad's home, and here he learned his first lesson. True power comes from fear, and fear comes from pain. But the moment his childhood ended was even darker. Sultan Murad II summoned Vlad's father for what he called diplomatic talks. It was a trap. Vlad II arrived with his 2 youngest sons, 11-year-old Vlad and 7-year-old Radu. The instant they crossed into Ottoman lands, soldiers arrested them. The Sultan gave their father a choice. Leave your sons here as hostages to ensure your loyalty, or watch them die in front of you. Vlad's father chose his own freedom. He rode away, leaving his boys behind. For young Vlad, watching his father's figure disappear into the distance, it was the last moment of his childhood. The Ottomans claimed they treated noble hostages well. Languages, philosophy, military training. And for little Radu it was true. He converted to Islam, charmed the Sultan, and became his favorite. Some whispered he became even more than that. But Vlad refused to bow. He spat at his tutors. He attacked other boys who mocked Christianity. He would not bend. So the Turks set out to break him. They used the falaka, beating the soles of the feet until the skin split open. They used the bastonado, hanging him upside down and striking his body with sticks. They starved him, isolated him, locked him in darkness. But the cruelest lesson wasn't taught through pain. It was taught through watching. Vlad was forced to witness Ottoman executions. Their favorite punishment for enemies wasn't beheading or hanging. It was impalement. He watched prisoners stripped, greased, and forced to sit on sharpened stakes. He learned that the stake couldn't be too sharp. It had to be blunt so it wouldn't kill too quickly. If placed carefully, it would slide through the body, avoiding vital organs and keeping the victim alive, sometimes for days. He was 12 years old, watching people die inch by inch, memorizing every detail. Meanwhile, back in Wallachia, everything was collapsing. His father tried to play all sides, Christian, Ottoman, Hungarian, but it caught up with him. In 1447, he was ambushed by rivals and hacked to pieces. But Vlad's older brother, Mircea, suffered worse. Captured alive, he was blinded with hot irons and then buried alive. He died clawing at the earth, choking on dirt. When news reached young Vlad, the Ottomans expected tears. Instead, he calmly asked, "How long did my brother take to die underground?" The soldiers didn't realize it yet, but the torture hadn't broken him. It had transformed him. That's when Dracula was born. After years as a hostage, Vlad was released around 1448. The Ottomans had a reason. They wanted him to be a puppet ruler in Wallachia. They thought the boy they had trained and tortured would serve their interests. But Vlad had no intention of being anyone's puppet. He had learned from the Ottomans, but not loyalty. He had learned power through fear. As the mighty Ottoman army advanced into Wallachia, they found not farmland, not villages, not cities, but a wasteland. Every crop had been burned, every well poisoned, every village emptied. For miles, the empire's greatest army marched through ash, silence, and smoke. But the scorched earth wasn't even the worst of it. Vlad had sent diseased prostitutes into the Ottoman camps. He had released plague victims into their ranks. Soldiers began dying before a single battle was fought. Then came June 17, 1462, the night attack. With only a small force of his best horsemen, Vlad rode under cover of darkness straight into the Ottoman camp. His target was clear: assassinate Sultan Mehmed II in his tent, end the invasion in one stroke. The attack was chaos. Vlad personally led the charge, cutting down guards and hacking through the maze of pavilions, searching for the Sultan. But in the confusion, his men stormed the wrong tent. Instead of Mehmed, they found the Grand Vizier. The assassination failed. Vlad barely escaped with his life as the entire Ottoman camp erupted into fire and steel. The next day, Mehmed pushed on toward Targovist, Vlad's capital. But when he arrived, the gate stood wide open. No soldiers on the walls, no defenders in sight. Suspicious, Mehmed advanced cautiously. And then his men saw it. For miles around the capital, covering 7 entire acres, stood wooden stakes. 20,000 of them. And on each stake, a human body, men, women, children, Turks taken prisoner, Bulgarian Muslims who had aided the Ottomans, Wallachian traitors. Some corpses had been dead for weeks, blackened and bloated, picked apart by crows. Others were fresher, still twitching, still moaning, still alive. The stakes weren't random. They were arranged in circles like a grotesque garden. At the very center, towering above the rest, stood Hamza Pasha's golden stake. The body of Mehmed's general still dressed in armor. The smell alone made hardened Ottoman warriors vomit. The sight made them cry. These were soldiers who had watched Constantinople fall. Soldiers who had seen entire cities burn to the ground. But this was beyond war. This was a vision of hell made real. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror, looked at this nightmare and muttered words that shook his army. "I cannot take the land of a man who does such things. What can one do against such a demon?" The man who never retreated, retreated. But here's the most chilling part. To Vlad, this wasn't just war. This was art. He called the forest of corpses his masterpiece. He walked among the stakes like a painter admiring his canvas. He adjusted bodies that slipped. He studied angles, learning which impalements lasted the longest. Captured Turkish sources record something most historians skip. Vlad would return to the impalement fields at night alone. He would sit among the dying, drinking wine, listening to their screams as though they were music. He touched the stakes to feel the vibrations of struggling bodies. He toasted them like honored guests. This wasn't just cruelty. This was pleasure. The Ottomans left, but they left behind Vlad's younger brother, Radu. Beautiful, charming Radu, who had thrived in Ottoman captivity. He offered Wallachians a choice: support him and live in peace, or stay loyal to Vlad the madman and be impaled. The choice wasn't hard. One by one, Vlad's nobles abandoned him. His army melted away. The man who never retreated, retreated. But here's the most chilling part. To Vlad, this wasn't just war. This was art. He called the forest of corpses his masterpiece. He walked among the stakes like a painter admiring his canvas. He adjusted bodies that slipped. He studied angles, learning which impalements lasted the longest. Captured Turkish sources record something most historians skip. Vlad would return to the impalement fields at night alone. He would sit among the dying, drinking wine, listening to their screams as though they were music. He touched the stakes to feel the vibrations of struggling bodies. He toasted them like honored guests. This wasn't just cruelty. This was pleasure. The Ottomans left, but they left behind Vlad's younger brother, Radu. Beautiful, charming Radu, who had thrived in Ottoman captivity. He offered Wallachians a choice: support him and live in peace, or stay loyal to Vlad the Madman and be impaled. The choice wasn't hard. One by one, Vlad's nobles abandoned him. His army melted away. By August 1462, Vlad fled to Hungary, begging for help from King Matthias Corvinus. But instead of allies, he found betrayal. Corvinus had been secretly negotiating with the Ottomans. Vlad was arrested and thrown into prison, and there he stayed 12 long years. But even in captivity, his sickness remained. Guards reported finding dead rats impaled on splinters in his cell, small birds skewered on sharpened quills, even insects pinned in miniature torture displays. When asked why, Vlad explained calmly, "I don't want to lose my skill." Think about that. 12 years in a dungeon, and his greatest fear wasn't death. It was losing practice in torture. Politics shifted again, and Hungary needed Vlad. He was released, even married off to a noblewoman. He converted to Catholicism, received troops, and reclaimed Wallachia. It was his third reign, and by now he was older, colder, and crueler. The impalements resumed immediately, but now with added psychological torment. Families were impaled in order: children first, then mothers, then fathers, forcing each to watch the next suffer. He experimented until victims lived up to a week on the stakes. One story is so grotesque that even chroniclers hesitated to write it. Vlad arranged Turkish prisoners in rows of stakes, shortest in front, tallest in back, like an amphitheater. In the center, he placed a pregnant woman impaled vertically. Hours later, as she died, she gave birth on the stake. The baby was killed instantly. Vlad sat and observed the entire process, taking notes. This was not war. This was not strategy. This was pure, calculated evil. December 1476, Vlad's time finally ran out. Marching with a small force, he was ambushed, either by Turks or by his own men. Counts differ. What is certain is that Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, died violently. His head was hacked off and sent to Constantinople. Sultan Mehmed displayed it on a stake above the city gates. The impaler had finally been impaled. His supposed body was buried at Snagov Monastery. But when archaeologists opened the tomb in 1931, it was empty. Some say monks secretly moved it. Others whisper darker tales. But Vlad's death didn't end his story. Here's the real horror. Today in Romania, Vlad the Impaler is remembered as a hero. Statues stand in his honor. His face decorates souvenirs. He's praised as a defender of Christianity, a wall against Islam. They celebrate his justice. The tales that under him, Wallachia was so safe a golden cup could sit at a fountain without being stolen. They ignore that this safety came from terror, so absolute people were too afraid to breathe wrong. They excuse the forests of the impaled. They excuse the screams of thousands. They excuse the babies on stakes. And that's the true nightmare of history. Not just that monsters exist, but that we excuse them when they're on our side. Vlad didn't impale 20,000 Turks because of religion. He impaled them because he enjoyed it. He impaled Christians, too. He impaled nobles, peasants, merchants, women, children. He impaled anyone who gave him an excuse. Or when he ran out, he invented excuses. Other rulers used execution as a tool. Vlad used it as entertainment. Others killed enemies. Vlad killed at random. He once impaled ambassadors for dressing too well. Another time he saw a peasant with a torn shirt. He asked if the man had a wife. When the man said yes, Vlad had the wife impaled for not caring for her husband properly. Then he handed the peasant a new wife and warned her, "Keep your husband better dressed or join your predecessor." This wasn't justice. This was psychopathy. Modern psychologists call him a sadistic psychopath. His methods of torture focused obsessively on sexual organs. He was, in essence, a medieval serial killer with a crown and an army. And perhaps the most terrifying detail, those who met him described him as charming, intelligent, cultured. He wrote poetry, studied philosophy, spoke multiple languages. He wasn't a wild beast. He was a refined, educated man who chose to use his brilliance to design the most exquisite suffering imaginable. That's what true evil looks like. Not madness, not mindless rage, but calm, deliberate cruelty. When the Turkish sword finally took his head, it didn't kill a defender of Christianity. It put down a rabid animal. The real Dracula didn't fear crosses, garlic, or sunlight. He did something worse. He proved that humans don't need fangs to become monsters.